Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the October 20th, 1998 session of the the Farmville Prince Edward Historical Society. Very glad that you're all here tonight. As you notice, we have an absence tonight in Billy. Billy and Barbara are enjoying a very much deserved vacation on a cruise in the Greek Isles. So I'm sure they're having a good time. I know Billy must like it, being there amongst the ruins of an ancient civilization, as any historian would. So I'm sure he's having a good time. So I'm going to sit in tonight. Our Vice President, Phil Blaker, is an official in his church. They have a very important meeting tonight, so he's there. His wife, Lynn, our secretary, is here tonight, but she's feeling a little bit under the weather, so she has waved the chain of command on down to me, your lowly treasurer, and I'm here tonight to preside the meeting. And I also have some bad news to present also, that our presentator tonight, Jo Smith, my neighbor and friend, River Road neighbor and friend, will not be with us tonight to make her presentation on High Bridge, in that she has had a medical emergency and had to get her stepfather to the hospital. So I will be kind of picking up the colors and running with that as well. We have her slides here. She left them at Polson's, and I will try and do my best to make a presentation on High Bridge. Being on River Road, you kind of learn a little bit about High Bridge by living there. So I will try and fill in for her as much as possible tonight, and we'll have a slideshow. A couple things, if I could just make a few announcements, things that are going on with the Historical Society. First, Shirley Blackwell just gave me a notice here that says there will be a fellow by the name of Dr. Egan Verhagen, I believe. Please forgive me if I mispronounced that. He will be at Bedford Auditorium November 8th at 3 p.m. in Bedford, doing a lecture on Thomas Jefferson as architect. And it says that this lecture explores the purpose of Jefferson's architecture, convinced that great architecture could promote as well as reflect civic virtue and Republican values. Jefferson employed classical Roman forms to create a new architectural model for the nascent United States. So he will be there November 8th, 3 p.m. in Bedford. And this is being put on by the Central Virginia Arts in cooperation with the Longwood College Art Department. So please, if you have a chance, go see that. But we did not have a board meeting prior to tonight's meeting due to absence. We didn't have a quorum as far as board members, so we really didn't have a meeting before the presentation tonight. But we just got ready for the presentation here. And a couple of things that we've been thinking about in our past meetings is that now that the bicentennial of Farmville has come to a close, I think you'll all agree it was very successful. We all had a great time with it. But our county, Prince Edward, will be having its sesquibicentennial in about another 5 or 6 years, probably year 2003 or 4. And probably our efforts should maybe start to focus and concentrate on meeting that celebration as well. And I think it's very prudent for us to begin years in advance and not just the year before that. So we can do all sorts of things. Hopefully we'll have some committees come out who would like to take part in some activities. One thing that we really need is a newsletter, because I admit I think we're probably the best entertainment value in Farmville for $15 a year or $1.25 a month. You can come out and have a nice program. But we'd also like for some people maybe to take the bull by the horns on some projects. Just some ideas would be like, remember, many of you back in the 1950s, I believe it was, there was a cemetery project for Prince Edward County. Do any of you remember that? Well, it's been over 40 years now. The results of that are in the clerk's office on file on cards, and it's about time perhaps for that to be updated. If some people would like to get together, maybe if you have Tuesday mornings off or something, you can get together and go to the cemeteries, start transcribing tombstones and making listings. Jan Hull just did a book for Buckingham County called Buckingham Burials, and you can use that as a model, and she did a very excellent job on it. She's moved to Vermont and is supposedly doing a second volume, building on it some more, and I don't know how she does it up there. I guess people send her the stuff and then she records it from there. But she has a second volume now coming out, and I think she has collected data for about 12 or 16 years on the first volume, but it came out to be very nice. Some things we could have possibly, I know this Historical Society will probably not be the main committee for the celebration, but of course we would be very prominent in that celebration. And we could do all sorts of things, such as a calendar. We can start like collecting the dates on that, like we did with the farmable calendar, little dates of things that happen. If we start assembling those now, it won't be so rough, because I just did that calendar for Cumberland, their accessible bicentennial for next year, and it was really hard just at the last minute or just within a few months trying to dig up a bunch of dates. So if we start in advance, we can have it really nice, and most of the days probably covered. One possibility would be to reprint Bradshaw's history, all contingent upon getting permission to do so, of course, and could use that perhaps as a fundraiser. I know with my own business I get about 2 calls a week for it, so I know that there's still a strong market on it. As a matter of fact, as Rush would say in my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, I got a bid from Book Crafters on it. That's who printed the last one that the county did. By looking at the specs from it, I wrote them and asked for a bid on it, and they sent me a bid of 500 copies at $7,620, 1,000 copies at $10,932, 2,000 copies at $17,612. So just something to think about if you want to do that, and then how you would price it accordingly if it was to be a fundraiser. We have new officers coming up beginning of January '99. I'm not exactly sure what our bylaws state as far as procuring officers, whether they're elected or whether, basically, if you want to be an officer, you're an officer. And it's not hard, and it's really not bad. Thank goodness for people like Billy, who's really kept us on, who's had good leadership with us and keeping us going. I'm the treasurer, and I spend maybe 10 minutes a month at it, actually, so it's not really hard. And one thing we need is a registrar. Our bylaws provide for that, and that's the person who keeps up with the membership. Billy's doing that too. So when you pay me for membership, you really need to pay him. He does the membership end of it and keeps meticulous records. He does a real good job of it. Then he gives me the money as treasurer to deposit in the bank. But that's one position that we need filled, is somebody to keep up with the membership, and it's really not that hard. Yesterday, I was approached by Alicia Davies in the Soil Conservation Office. She told me that she's written a grant for the stream bank stabilization project that they're trying to do. Friends of the Appomattox River, trying to clean up the river. And she asked me if I knew about this bridge that was down on the river. And what she was referring to was the old Tidewater and Western Farmable Powhatan Railroad here. And there was the one column, brick column, there was a steel superstructure over the river. One brick column on the Prince Edward side is intact and standing, looking pretty good. The Cumberland side has fallen and is deteriorated. But she told me that what has happened since is when they've dropped the bridge and it laying in the water, trees have caught up in that bridge, and it's actually kind of has a damming effect where the water level is rising now and coming up onto the Prince Edward County shoreline, and basically the water is going around this pier. She showed me some pictures that she'd taken, and I couldn't believe it. The erosion to the river has gone right up to the structure itself, to where you can actually see the foundation and the footers of it right into the bank. So it's not going to be long before the water is going to bring this into the river. I've got some pictures of it that I took 10 years ago, and at that time there was enough bank probably from me to the slide projector. Now all that bank from there right up to the pillar is gone, and you can actually see all the way down to the footers in the bank. Part of what they're trying to do is get a stabilization grant so they can try and help clean up some of the log jams in the river to hopefully cut down on soil erosion. And that would perhaps help us in our endeavor in historic preservation to perhaps save this one bridge abutment, which is one of the only last reminders of the old Farmable Powhatan Railroad. That's about it for my things for right now. So I guess, any questions about anything? Does anybody have any announcements you want to make before we begin? All right. Well, let's take a look at the High Bridge. I'm going to try and do this slideshow by using her slides. And a couple of things here on the back table are some books of hers. Her book on High Bridge here is $5 a copy if you like. And some of you might have heard I bought that contract to build the High Bridge, the wooden superstructure originally. This is a copy of that document. If you like to, you can read it right here. They did a transcription. This is probably a little easier to read. This handwritten part gives you the dimensions and specifications for the bridge, how it's supposed to be put together. The wooden superstructure. This is a transcription to the full. I need to read this. And then last year, Sandy Lyles over in Cumberland, I got this picture from her. She went to a bookstore in Richmond with her grandson to get a book or something. Opened up an old book, and there was this picture in it of these guys standing on top of a steel bridge, taking a break, smoking cigarettes, well, and it says High Bridge, Virginia, June 1914. So this was when they built the steel superstructure, the steel bridge. And she asked the guy, she knew what it was being from Cumberland, asked the guy, you know, if she could buy this. He just looked and said, oh, just take it all home with you. Bless his heart. So she sold it to me for my collection and all. But I feel like this guy, whoever took this picture, I don't believe he went down there to take this one picture. It's probably a whole series of these somewhere. So that's something to look for. So you're welcome to look at these. Do you think we will have light enough? Do you think we'll need more darkness?
Probably.
More darkness?
Mm-hmm. Maybe turn off a light or two.
Let's see. Let's think I can do to the handle box.
That one up there is probably the most
Yeah, the
impressive.
one at the back.
I'll get that.
In 1850s is what I'm figuring, 1860, just before the war began. Let's go back. We've heard so much about during the war when they retreated from Rice on over to Cumberland. We're on the Prince Edward side here, looking to Cumberland. There's the wagon bridge. This is what was saved that enabled Humphrey's Second Corps to cross, thereby leading to the engagements at Cumberland Church later that day, April 7, 1865. The bridge, of course, crosses right about there, the river that is. Isn't that amazing? Here's an abutment. The original bridge consisted of 20 brick piers supporting a wooden superstructure and built at a cost of $167,500. It varied in height from 60 feet at the abutment to 125 feet near the river and spanned a total of 2,400 feet from end to end. Chief Sanford reported to the stockholders meeting, there have been higher bridges not so long and longer bridges not so high, but taking the weight and length together, this is perhaps the largest bridge in the world. You can see this is called a pen and quill feathering quarrying technique. Is somebody here familiar with that? These little ridges that you see there, somehow these were gouged into the rock and then you tried to split them between two. Yes, sir. You familiar with that?
I've been told they drill those holes and drive plugs into them, and eventually it'll split off like that split off.
Okay.
Or if you're up north way, you fill them with water and let them freeze.
There you go. If you'll notice here in Farmville, when you go under the underpass here, you know, when the train's going by, we do our underpass thing, you'll notice that type of quarrying construction on the rocks there on the side. You'll see those markings. The foundations of some of the stone piers extended 8 feet below the ground and rested on clay and gravel. The bases were built of stone masonry to a point 3 feet above the ground. These stones were quarried in the vicinity and hauled over a narrow gauge railroad to the main line. There was a quarry located near High Rock Baptist Church, a mile east of Rice, and there was another on the Farley property, 1/2 mile northeast of the bridge. The completed piers were 8 by 22 feet at the top and 14 by 27 feet at the base, with 2 shafts running from top to bottom. And that will be crucial. If you read that contract, you'll see how there's an iron cable or bolt that runs from the top to bottom, and it laps over the plate up here used to hold down the tie plates. And I guess they would from time to time go in there and tighten those things up and adjust them. So that's what's long metal rods that go up from inside the pier up over the top and then come back down on the other side. So I guess it's going to be 4 of them on each side. Well, excuse me, 2 on this side, 2 on this side. Wood was originally considered for the piers. However, engineer Sanford went to great lengths to study other structures in the country and abroad, and finally determined that brick would be a better choice for the piers. He also was influenced in this decision by the fact that the clay in the immediate vicinity was of superior quality for brick making, and the cost would be 1/3 of stone. For many years there was evidence on the northeast side of the tracks of many large holes which were believed to have been used for kilns. For economic reasons, wood was chosen for the superstructure. The superstructure is anchored to the foundation by iron rods running through the shafts of the piers. The bridge iron rail was purchased from Carr, Kellen, and Blima Iron Works in Wales and delivered to City Point, the tidewater terminal of the railroad. All right, the hole. I've heard everything from, yeah, that's where they shot at the Indians at, or, yeah, that's where the Civil War had hit all the gunpowder. I don't believe any of that. That stuff was there before the war, and it had to have been used for something, perhaps storage in the unit. I don't know why this one seems to have the hole in it and not so many of the others. But I don't think they shot at Indians from it, and I don't think the Civil War soldiers stored their gunpowder in it. That's just my feeling. Does anybody else here know why those holes were inside the pier, or in this one in particular? That seems to be a big mystery with this. This is a nice picture coming from the Library of Congress. This is from the Rice side, looking over to Cumberland. That would be Mike Rice's part here, and Joe living over on this side. Look at it. There's your wagon bridge at the bottom. I mean, High Bridge was a big attraction. People, they'd walk out of town, hang out at it. It was quite an imposing structure, no doubt. All right, this is the Ed Beyer print. He was a German artist who came here and did something called the Album of Virginia. There's only like 2 man-made pictures, structured pictures of man-made things that he did. One was this High Bridge. I just think this, I've got an original of this hanging up in my living room. It was in the exhibit. I could just stare at it for hours. I never get tired. Just notice you got your river here. Look at how it's all dug out here. This is over on the John Motley Overton side. He was living there at the time. All this dug out. It says in the original thing here that it was like 3,400 feet long, and I believe that what he's including there is from this abutment here on back is wooden trestle. Built up later, they built up the approach here to where it was all earthen. So I believe that 3,400 feet probably includes this trestle right here. And of course the 2,400 foot measurement would be the span from abutment to abutment. But notice you got a bridge tender's house here. More than likely, I believe that's what that is. Notice how this is just cleared out with stumps. You got a big chimney right here. What could this be? I don't believe anyone really built a house down there to live. Probably when they were doing construction on the bridge, they probably had labor camps there of workers who were living right on site. And this could be like a kitchen house or something for them used to cook food with perhaps. And if you can get right up close, you'll notice right here is a little foot pedestrian bridge on this side of the bridge that goes over to the north side, the Cumberland side. The wagon bridge, of course, is on the other side of the bridge. Notice there's a little road right here coming along. So I really think that's a neat picture. That's the colorized version. You usually get it in an earth tone variety. Ed Beyer, a German artist. Thank you for your work. Mercy. Okay. Looks like some Nottoway graves here. Looks like Chuck Ironmonger and Dan Williamson. This is at the Hillsman House. I'm not exactly sure why we're looking at that. Okay. Because High Bridge had Civil War significance. That's Jack Price and Chuck Ironmonger there at the Hillsman House. Here we go. All right, on April 7th, General William Mahone's division arrived at High Bridge as a rear guard of Confederate troops with orders to burn the railroad and wagon bridges behind them to prevent the enemy from crossing at this point. Through some misunderstanding, there was a delay before the Confederate engineer, whose name was Talcott, Colonel Talcott, received orders to fire the 2 structures. The Union soldiers were able to quench the fire of the wagon bridge, whose green timbers were slow in burning. However, the High Bridge was rendered impassable. And they set it on fire at this end, and it just kept burning down this way. And finally, when it got into the fourth span, it just collapsed, thereby saving the rest of the bridge from burning. Thank goodness. After the war, it was September 22nd, 1865, that the Union engineers finished the completion to the repairs on High Bridge, and it went back into service, thereby fixing the rest of the Southside Railroad. It was like the Southside Railroad was completed when the High Bridge was finished, and then after the war, the Southside Railroad repairs were completed once the High Bridge repairs were completed as well. My understanding is they would back a train up to this end, at the Rice end, they unloaded passengers, freight, everything would be portaged down the hill, across a temporary bridge, brought all the way up here, reloaded, and then the train would be on a separate train that would back up to this point. So that must have been something. I'm sure it was a big convenience when they finally got it fixed. Here's some piers. Let's see, the concrete pedestals which support these 107-foot towers are 6 feet square at the top, 8 foot 6 inches square at the bottom, and 8 foot high. The steel girders, holy cow, we're getting into the modern bridge here. All right, with increased railroad traffic, as well as the appearance of additional cracks, what happened here was, after the Civil War, they replaced the wooden superstructure with a metal superstructure on top of the brick pilings. However, with the greater length of trains, heavier weight, they began to crack these pilings. And one of the attempts the engineers did to help prevent all this from damaging the pilings was to put these angle iron braces on the corners. And then, of course, they'd be cabled across with bolts to hold them together. And apparently that didn't work, but for so long, they put like 2 steel superstructures on top of the brick pilings. And finally, in the latter part of 1912, plans were finalized for an additional bridge to be built for a double-track steel bridge just 20 feet to the north and paralleling the existing bridge. This side, you got your signal line. This was redone back in the mid-30s. Then on the other side was your telegraph line. Work on the foundations began, and fill began in May of 1913. Dirt for the embankments at each end was excavated with a steam shovel and hauled in by cars by rail and dumped at the site. Farmers in the Stoddard and High Bridge communities assisted in the construction of the embankments. Among those who worked their teams of mules and scrapers were Willie Crowder, Jeter Crowder, Carey Smith Jr., Asa Smith Jr., Woodfin Ligon, and Pittman Amos. The large cavity created by the excavation is clearly visible on the northeast side of the tracks at the River Road crossing. There you can see the steel superstructure here sitting on top of the brick pilings. And it looks like they've got their angle iron braces on there at this point when this picture was taken. That is awesome. Here's your steel bridge. They actually put this thing together in about 2 months' time, never interrupting service. They brought the pieces in prefabbed after doing all the footer work. The concrete towers here were brought in prefabbed and set by cranes into place from right off of the old tracks here. And then the top will be placed on top. The bridge, which is still in use today, has 43 spans. There were 2 end spans 90 feet long, 20 intermediate spans 72 feet long, and 21 tower spans 38 feet long. This results in a total length of 2,418 feet between the back walls. It is approximately the same length as the original 1854 bridge. Now, they did demolish in World War II, just before it, 4 of these concrete or brick pillars on the north side were demolished, I believe, by Motley Construction, and the bricks were salvaged. Some of them used to build an addition onto the back of the shoe factory. When they built the steel bridge here, you can see the river is right there. There was a pillar probably sitting right between these 2 here, right on the edge of the river, and they brought that one down just so that just in case the river did erode it away and it fell, it wouldn't fall onto the steel bridge. So they went ahead and demolished that column when they built the steel bridge. Here's a look from the bottom. It's awesome. And when I got that contract, it doesn't call it the high bridge. You know, I guess it wasn't called that till after it was built. Whoa, it's a high bridge. But it just says bridge over the valley of the Appomattox River near Farmville. But the clincher in it that it had to be high bridge was it said that the spans were on center to center, I think 112 feet apart. And that's what it matches to here. Because the only other bridge over the Appomattox River that the south side had was the trestle here at Farmville. And those pillars aren't nearly that far apart. Mercy, there's the embankment. Okay. Another bottom shot, there you go. You can see the spans ending here. The ones long in here were demolished for construction later on. The bricks salvaged. Apparently the wartime made bricks hard to get. This looks once again from the Cumberland side, looks like. Bottom shot. Any questions so far? Wow. And to think all that was cleared underneath at one time, and just forest is just retaken. There's our door where they shot at Indians from.
Can you go back to the previous one for a second?
So that's good.
One of them,
Old abutment with a wooden superstructure, and the builder's plate for Roanoke iron and steel erection, I believe. The builder's plate is right up along in here. When they painted it about 10 years ago, they used a special kind of sand. It was like $75 a ton for sandblasting, real hard sand. And on Monday mornings, they would back a tractor trailer of that down the track. So if I wanted to get to work on time, I had to get out before that was being backed down the tracks. Mercy. Well, that looks like that's it for our slide presentation. Can some of our members discuss a little bit about High Bridge? Let's hear some memories.
My dad guarded that bridge for World War I.
Was that like in the Farmville Guard?
Yes.
Local militia, they were guarding it for sabotage?
No, he was working, no, yes.
Oh, okay, he worked guarding with the railroad, not military kind of thing. Okay, interesting. Interesting. Now, what hours did he do that at night or in the day or?
I think he did.
Okay. Interesting. Now, the purpose was sabotage
That
or
was
just?
it, they guarded it day and night.
It was that important. Critical rail link.
If you're talking about the sort of thing, most of those things were hollow. I have a deer stand down there right at the one next to the river,
Right.
familiar with it, and most of them are hollow.
Right.
And they did that probably to save money. You know, they built them hollow. And then those iron rods had to be attended to.
Right, that's what I was thinking. With the rods and probably had to crawl up in there, I guess. One of them might break or something, have to be replaced. They have to be able to get into it somehow. Makes sense.
Way early on, you were talking about king and queen something. Would you tell me what that is?
King and Queen Post Truss. I believe.
Yeah.
The term is in the contract. My feeling is that that was probably a post that was mortised male on one end and female on the other end. Does that make any sense?
Mortise to what?
Well, all right, you have one up straight, then another one came in at an angle like this.
Okay.
Then another one up straight and at an angle. So this would either mortise in either a slot for female, and then you'd have the male end hook into it, or vice versa. It's an engineering term. Bill, Mr. Andrews, can you explain that?
Can't help you with that.
Can't help it. You know what the concept? King and Queen Post Truss.
I've heard of it.
I assume it means that one end is mortise in a male, and the other end would be mortise female.
Well, thank you.
That's just my feeling on that. I haven't had anybody else who can explain it to me. That's just what I was thinking it must have been. Anybody else? Come on, there's got to be some stories about High Bridge. Somebody crossing
you
here
remember 25 years ago when it was blown up?
by the Green Berets
That's
coming
right.
into town. Remember that?
Right. The National Guard was supposed to defend it.
That's
By
right.
the time they realized they were there, they set off the charges, they was all over. They didn't even know they were there.
There you go. Yeah, my understanding is they parachuted into Pickett and made their way over land.
Right.
And with some friendly locals had help, and I got the feeling they're probably hanging out at Sam Wilson's and trying floodlights operating out there probably. And yeah, they took it out.
I think he led that for, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah, because they've just now tried to redo that same special forces group, and they wouldn't give them permission to get near the railroad.
Whoa. Okay. Interesting.
Who is that? Well, I'm not sure exactly. I think it's the Army, whatever special forces.
Green Berets, I think that
Yeah.
that was a group of Green Berets,
Yeah.
I believe.
They wanted to have a maneuver that was similar to what was done 25 years ago. It was not the Army. The Army wanted to get permission. The railroad would not allow them to get it. And they said, well, we'll sign anything you want to have signed, releasing you from the responsibility that they want to do.
My understanding is during World War II, they did a radar experiment at High Bridge, dropping aluminum strips of foil to see if that would interfere with radar. Does anybody remember that by any chance? That doesn't ring a bell? Heard something about that. I don't know how true that is.
I know it's a manufacturing place over in Buckingham who makes these aluminum strips of just on the north side of that mountain.
Motley Foil.
Still in business.
Yes.
They still selling a lot to the service.
Now, I understand that the CWA Flight 800 had some of their foil on the flight. That the FBI contacted them wanting to know, what that was. They're one of the only places in the country that make that color foil, like your Werther's wrappers, right over here, Buckingham. Glitter. When you get glitter, it was colored probably right over here at Motley Foil. It's one of the few places in the country that does that.
There's no sign on that. I wondered what was.
Yeah, it's a very lucrative business. I don't guess they really need to advertise. How about some stories of trains, people passing over them? Can you remember passing over the bridge? Any other forms of construction at it?
Bob, during World War II, Creditor was heavily engaged in making shoes for the services. And the addition on the north end of the Creditor plant, the ground and the 3 stories above it, was built out of the brick, as you mentioned before. From the brick at High Bridge, there was a hole in the end. The brick were used to make that addition.
Okay, so getting brick, I take it then, was hard to come by if they resorted to doing that. How about any train stories going over High Bridge? I just remember in the 3rd grade at Prince Edward Academy, they herded us on the train, and we rode over, I think we rode the crew and back or something, and it was awesome. I'm so glad that I could at least share that, but it's like, yeah, you just going along, and all of a sudden, it's like quiet. It's just like you're just flying almost. Apparently, in the early days, High Bridge, there was a lot of people afraid to cross it because it was so high, and left you with a kind of scary feeling, I guess, on the old steam trains.
Do you know when the belt line was built?
Beltline, wouldn't that be early Ozies?
Well, it was done to take care of the heavy toll traffic from the western part of the state that goes between here and Keysville. We crossed the other bridges. One of those was off and the west and the other one was Virginia Railroad.
Yeah, to this day, I believe, because of High Bridge, they ship the
Oh, yeah,
empties back
most
over
of
High
it goes-
Bridge. And the coal coal comes to Beltway.
Come back at first.
There you go.
We had to go over there to our house, and these trains obviously go a lot faster than. It's sometimes quite a while to wait for them.
Well, Mr. Osmond, can you tell us some of the changes that you've seen happen over there at High Bridge over the years?
I do not remember coming over in 1915 when I brought up all as a child down Richmond, came by train. And the new bridge was completed then. I don't know, people make a instance, one of the big places I saw a brick line foxhole. Confederate soldiers stayed there a long time at those places, and they, up in Smith's Woods there, they had brick lines box of it. They spent some time.
There you go. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there was like a 300-man garrison there that guarded the bridge during the war. So it was that strategic. And they would go up and down the railroad from here down to Stanton River Bridge, and often being moved back and forth. So that must have been something. And they blew up the redoubts to keep the Yankees from getting most of the stuff. And I read some accounts of salvage work done after the war by the Yankee soldiers going to get out all the guns and all that went in fortifications. Well, any other questions or comments about anything on High Bridge? Yes.
Was the route that is eventually built through the double bridges at Keysville, was that the original plan?
Oh, that's my understanding.
Keep it south of the river?
Yes. That along that ridge somehow between the Appomattox and the Stanton River. That ridge was the original route. But Farmville people subscribed to $100,000 worth of stock to get it to come through here. Because otherwise there was no reason for it to come here at all.
Okay, if it had gotten to Keysville, Keysville would have been big enough, huh?
We might be a suburb of Keysville. I don't understand why Burkeville isn't the size of Lynchburg or Farmville a suburb.
They don't go that close to Keysville.
Had the R&D and the Southside Crossing there.
It goes through Abilene.
I don't understand why we aren't a suburb of Burkeville.
Well, soon after World War II, the Norfolk and Western was building this fast passage train, and they had a contest on, and the person who named it would receive a prize of $25,000. And I don't know who named it, but the name was about that hour. And it was a fast train from here to Cincinnati. It stopped at Petersburg, Crewe, Farmville, Lynchburg, and Roanoke and Bluefield. It didn't stop at all these other ones.
I see. Well, when did passenger service with NWN end? 1950s sometime?
I can remember riding the train from this depot to Richmond to catch the train to go to Washington.
Amtrak.
Amtrak, yeah.
Yeah, I've ridden from this station in the 40s to go to Florida. We had to go to Petersburg to change trains.
Wow. All right, folks. Any other comments, questions, anything?
Used to have 4 passenger trains a day,
Four passenger. Okay, 4 a day.
Well, in the 1950s.
I worked in the post office.
Oh, you were here?
They had 4 trains
Yeah, he was 51.
and Pat.
All right.
Wow.
When do you think it ended, the
Rail
passenger service?
Amtrak came through here in the 70s, I know, because I didn't come here in 72, and I did it 2 or 3 times to Chicago.
service.
Did
There
they
was a
stop?
gap sometime between NW and Amtrak.
But did they
Well-
stop or did they just go through?
No, I got on here and went to Chicago. I did it 3 times. The way the Amtrak thing worked, each railroad they switched crews as they went. It's the same train. But if it was Norfolk Western, it was Norfolk Western crew that ran it. And when they hit some other railroad, then that railroad crew, just whoever it was, then that crew ran. And so as you ran over each railroad, the one might run real fast and smooth, and the next one you get on and it go over 20 miles an hour, and the guys would have buttons missing off their uniforms and whatever. It just depended on which railroad it was. I'm not sure how they worked on that.
I think they changed engines sometimes.
But that had to be after 72 is when I came to Farmville.
I think it was 75.
That's what I would guess, something like that.
I rode it when I was 7.
All right. Good deal. Everybody needs to ride over the High Bridge.
27 there, so
I'd ride the
77.
train.
Preferably.
I did too.
Yeah, you're still talking about revival.
Reviving what? Overpasses or why not? I just,
Sure, he could raise look out the window.
what other train left other than the Powhatan Arrow?
No.
Pocahontas? There you go.
Wanted passenger to get over.
Can you imagine, Farmville, if there was a high-speed European intercity train, 30 minutes to Richmond?
Hey, have to
You've got it here.
I don't know if there's anywhere around here.
You would think there'd have been more than one. You would think there'd been more than one passenger.
That would be nice. Maybe at some point again, we could be able to go down to High Bridge, but since the late unpleasantness when the people got hurt, the railroad's really tightened up on trespassing and all, and they've told Joe that she can't take groups and things like that down there anymore. That's the regulation.
How high did you say it is?
It's about 120 feet high at the river, about 60 feet at the north side abutment, 120 feet, 120, 125 at the river. That'd be the highest point.
I'm the newcomer. I was not here when the unpleasantness happened. Kids.
Well, I wasn't referring to the Civil War, which I know.
Well, I wasn't either. The kids.
There was some people over on Rice, I don't want to say what they were doing, but they were out on the bridge late at night, the train came through. One girl, she was like hanging on a railroad tie on the edge, and things are just doing like that when the train goes over them. She fell and hit the bank and rolled on down, got hurt, and she died a couple years later from it, I believe it was. One person was killed there, and he was up top. Somebody on the rescue squad told me that they were on the call and that they were down in the bottom. Somebody kept saying they're down there, and they couldn't find anybody, and then said, listen, and you could hear blood dripping on the floor, the ground that is. And they went back up top, and there was a guy who was laying up there on the rails. That his body was intact, it just took like a piece off the back of his head, but that his bones were just pulverized, like if you pick his arm up, it wouldn't stick out straight, and it was like a snake or a garden hose. His bones were just pulverized.
So there were more than two.
Apparently there ended up being 2 fatalities, and somebody else got away, and somebody else, I believe, got hurt. And I believe a settlement just happened here recently on all that. But because of that, they no longer can you go down to High Bridge. And
There was something, a celebration here in Farmville, and if you wanted to go to High Bridge, you went down to the fire station, and they took us to Ralph Hager's son-in-law's farm and took us down into High Bridge.
That's Mike Rice.
yeah, that'd be Mike's.
That's who we're talking about.
Right, but that was, what, 3 or 4, 5 years ago?
Must have been something special then.
It was something special, and we went down.
Oh, they didn't used to say anything. You used to drive a truck out on that, park it, go on down, get on the bridge, come back. Nobody said a word.
Yeah, all these rules and regulations, it just ain't America.
Nobody said anything about it until 45 years ago.
I know that there are port stations on the Cumberland side. Are there also
Yes,
civil
on
war
the
locations
Prince
on
Edward
the
side as well. Each side of the river and the tracks, there's a fort. And the Cumberland side are the best preserved. The signal line, when they redid it in the 1930s, they just bulldozed right through one of the forts. And then the one on the other side is where George Petrakos, you might have seen, it's a real famous relic hunting picture with all the shells that were dug out of the fort. Real famous relic hunting picture. We all just drool over every time we see it. But it was just awesome, all the shells that came out of this one fort, including some that are of English make called an Armstrong, which had a lead sabot all around it that would break apart real easily when it exploded. But yeah, it's 4 forts on each side of the track and river. And great engineering feats. And there was a 300-man garrison that guarded the bridge, meaning they had to have some type of barracks or something. I believe it's right where Marshall Smith, right in his backyard now, the younger Smith, has it patched in the woods, his house. I believe right behind his house is probably where the garrison was. And you can see the remains for the narrow gauge that they used to haul in the bricks and all from the other side of the river. They had to have a little crossing, a little trestle for that to cross the Appomattox River even, to get over to the Cumberland side with bricks and stone. Well, I don't know, it's an awesome undertaking, engineering feat. It's a real piece of Virginiana, and we're mighty lucky to have it here in Farmville.
Did you say that is the wagon bridge still there?
No, it's gone. Yeah, no sign of it, it's just gone. But I don't know, it just seems to me there needs to be some way to get across the Appomattox River from Farmville going east. You have to go all the way to Stony Point to cross the river. Now I'm thinking the state took over the road system in 1930. At Jamestown, just a little east of High Bridge, there was a crossing there. And that bridge was condemned about 1920 and later washed away in a subsequent flood. But if it had made it as long as 1930 to be incorporated in the state road system, there might well indeed be a road right there now crossing over to get to the right side. Because, boy, it's something. For me, like I lived 8 miles down River Road, and you either have to drive 12 miles to cross over at Stony Point or go back through Farmville to get around to Rice. So at some point, it seems to me they're going to have to put a road around Farmville, a northern bypass kind of thing. And it's going to be somewhere out there, I figure in that area. The High Hill Slaughterhouse Road would be perfect.
That's where they used to cross.
There you go. That was a crossing there, Morton's Crossing, Morton's Ford. Any questions? Any other comments? The High Bridge, we love it. I'm sorry that you had me present it. It just hit me at 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Back in the older days, a lot of people walked it to come to work.
Wow.
I had an uncle that did that.
Wow. Just a regular daily thing?
Yes.
Well, I've done it at night.
They
I wouldn't think I'd do it.
You've done it at night?
Yeah.
You wouldn't do it at daytime?
It was the signal. On the Farmville side, you have an orange light. And so when you look at that, you can tell that if it goes green, you know it's going into the light. If it turns red, you know the train's coming this way. As opposed to most signals, they all stay green until it goes to red. And then you know which way it's coming. But for some reason, because of the bridge, it would be a yellow light. And when it turned green, you knew that it was headed that way, or when it turned red, that the train was coming the opposite way. So I don't know, you just...
That's why they replaced it, because it didn't work all the time.
All right. Oh, yeah. Canoe. With the canoe. Oh, technically, no. But you can do it.
Just take care of that alone.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for coming out, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
We'll hope to see you next month. I believe Sid Newman will be talking to us about early aviation in Farmville.
Sid Newman.
Next time.
Sid Newman.
Thank you.
I'm going to go. So if you don't mind, just get one more seat. Well, I'll hold it. If you get too comfortable, you won't get up.
Watch out for the cord, everybody.
Just on the
Yeah.